Hey everyone, it's Jack. So about a year ago at this point, I did a video talking about each of the challenges on Drag Race and which ones I think they could do without. I did that weird neutral conclusion thing that I often come to where I'm like, I think each challenge has its merit and none of them should be taken out, they just kind of need to be innovative. And I think I still hold true to that point, but with this innovation comes sometimes these unique versions of the challenges that just end up being pretty bad. And that's what I want to talk about today. What is the worst iteration of each of these challenges on Drag Race? Different traits of each challenge can cause it to be the worst. It can be unfair competition wise, it could just not be entertaining to watch as a viewer, it can just be down to the fact that the queens weren't on their A game and they didn't perform well in the challenge and it just made it not a good watch. Each challenge definitely has an iteration that I don't like, so let's go through them now. Also, I've taken a break from YouTube, I'll talk a little more about that at the end of the video, but just right now, please subscribe. I'm going on a couple trips in October, but I want to consistently upload, so it would be amazing to have you here. Let's speedrun the worst iteration of the challenge that we all know, Snatch Game Season 14, we kinda got it. I've talked about this one to death. I've done a full ranking on the Snatch Games already. You can go check that out. So let's just hit the bullet points. Deja did really good and the rest of the people did really bad, but over time, it's very clear that the edit was definitely a lot worse than their actual performances. The characters that a lot of the queens went with were a lot more charismatic than they were just naturally funny. And I think Deja hit it right on the head, picking a character that's quotable and very recognizable from the start. This challenge was one of the only challenges on Drag Race where it wasn't even really about the challenge, more so than setting things up for the future. I feel like halfway through Snatch Game, they didn't even really care about the actual game anymore. They skipped out on a couple questions for people in favor of just doing confessionals to say how bad everyone was doing. The challenge ended up serving more as a stepping stool into what they were doing next week than an actual challenge itself. Other bad Snatch Games, if you count the Gaffin from All Stars 1 as a Snatch Game, I also ranked that pretty low. And going international, I really still do not like Down Under Season 1, and Down Under Season 3 wasn't that great either. Moving on to one that I definitely haven't talked about, the Design Challenge, which is different from the ball to me. I love design challenges on Drag Race because we get a lot of really iconic looks. I'm watching UK Series 5 and Banksy's look that she just did was so amazing. There's often a really cool theme or they have to use unconventional materials, just all around a really creative time. But sometimes the design challenges only go as far as the crazy theme, but the materials they use are a lot more standard, while other times it's a crazy theme with crazy materials. What I'm getting at is Season 8's Keeping It 100 design challenge. And on paper, I think this is a really cool idea, a blast from the past showing how far they've come, but in practice, it's not really that fair. A good majority of the queens got to work with fabrics, but then you get queens like Acid Betty or Kim Chi who have to work with money and hair. Bob has to work with window curtains as opposed to actual fabric. And then Naomi has a whole separate issue where she has to decorate a boat and also do an outfit too, and it doesn't really align with like what they're judging. Like, should they judge her on the design of her boat like they did in the original challenge, or is it more on her outfit or everything together? The tasks of each queens were not the most balanced, and I think that's where I run into an issue with the challenge. If they did this on Season 15 with a lot more seasons in the belt, a lot more design challenges, I feel like they could have done something more creative. I would love to see this come back because it is a really interesting concept, but it's just not the most balanced at this point in the show. I think the more common answer that I understand people also really don't like, but I do because it's so stupid, would be that weird princess challenge from Season 9. They had the green screen heads with the characters' sidekicks and they had to do Mad Libs to come up with answers for these questions. Some of those early challenges on Season 9 were so interesting. I think we'll get to one later. There were a lot of misses, and this princess one on paper definitely is, but it's just so stupid and I can't help but be entertained. Actually, while we're at it, let's talk about the worst choreography challenge. I think there's honestly a couple. I don't really like these challenges because they like push the queens to do a little too much, and that's how we've ended up with multiple injuries. So based on what I just said, it would have to be between Season 9's cheerleading challenge and Season 11's Olympics thing that they did. Both of these challenges had queens getting injured with Eureka and Evie respectively. And it's honestly for a product that I don't even really think pays off in the end. Especially with the cheerleading challenge, like they were able to do a lot of the basic skills, but that's where it stops. The entertainment comes from the circumstance they're in rather than the actual performances they're doing. So when they can only really do basic cheerleading moves, unless you're entertained by the fact that it's drag queens doing cheerleading and not that great, then you're just not really going to be entertained at all, and that's where I'm at. And like James Mansfield said walking back into the workroom, she didn't expect to do a cheerleading challenge on Drag Race.
In my defense, they didn't say you had to be a fucking cheerleader on that application when I filled it out.
I think these challenges are wildly unfair as well because it's a lot of physicality that some queens just can't pull off the same. It's one thing to do a music video and work with the choreographer because they often work around you, but it's another thing to do a lot of this really intricate choreography, and especially with like the cheerleading, they have to do lifts and stuff. Physical activity that I just don't think think they expected coming into this show. There are other choreography challenges that work super well. There's the Black Swan one from season 5 that was almost like a precursor to Rusicals with a whole story, and I think that was one of the best choreography challenges we've gotten. So it can work really well, but the more the queens feel like they have to push themselves to wow the judges, I feel like the worse the choreography challenges get. For the commercial challenges, there are a couple that I can go with. For as funny as Asia was in the Tap That App challenge on season 10, I don't remember anything else in that challenge. But there's another one that I don't remember at all, even though it gave us so many iconic moments from it. And that was the Glamazon versus Champions challenge on season 4. It was like episode 3 at this point. It was basically all just promo for RuPaul's music, very of the time challenge. It only really ends up here because I want to talk about it, and I think that a lot of the other commercial challenges are just strong challenges in general. I watch season 4 probably once a year, and it's still so hard for me to remember this challenge, but it is easy to remember everything around it. It's because of this challenge that the iconic fight between Jeremy and Sharon happened, and it also gave us one of the best lip syncs of all time with This Will Be with Dita Ritz. So much Drag Race history came out of the aftermath of this challenge, so it's kind of overshadowed, and that's why I don't end up remembering it.
When I first heard Ladyboy, my madam said, "That's not soy sauce in your panties."
Hey, it's Jack from editing. I kept this list mostly in the US seasons, but I need to talk about Draglexa because I just remembered that challenge was a thing after I repressed it. It's easily the worst commercial challenge we've had. I also just remembered Down Under season 1 wasn't that great either, but Draglexa was so bad that there wasn't even a winner for the challenge. The jokes didn't land. When the queens were filming, they didn't really have it all together. If there was a winner that I would pick for this challenge, it would be River, but I understand why they didn't want to give a win out. I don't think it was outstanding by any means. UK Series 3 was such a mess of a season, and I honestly want to talk about it pretty soon.
There was no originality there. It was all what we've seen before. So I'm disappointed. I'm really disappointed. This week, there will be no winners.
The opposite of commercial challenges, where I think most are pretty solid, is acting challenges, where I have a ton to pick from. I could pick season 15 for the nonsensical editing that didn't fit the vibe of Drag Race, regardless of if they were paying homage to something. I can pick season 7, and I probably should pick season 7 because it's the most obvious pick. The iteration in All Stars 3 is already incredibly dated. The American Horror Story one from All Stars 6 went on for so long, and I'm just not a huge fan of All Stars 8. There's some funny moments, but not my favorite. Ultimately though, I think it comes down between two: Breast World from season 10 and Sex and the Kitty Girl from All Stars 4. I will say I haven't watched the original things that these are doing parodies to, but I've talked to multiple fans of these shows and they say that this is still not a good tribute at all. And every other acting challenge that I listed, there's at least one moment that I enjoy. The best moment from these two is Monet's ad-libs, something that wasn't even in the script.
He's dead!
Oh Lord, she getting back up again.
They run way too long, they're poorly written, and they're unfairly written as well, especially for Sex and the Kitty Girl, where there were only 2 parts that could really win the challenge. But if I really had to pick between the two, I would say Breast World is the worst, because Sex and the Kitty Girl at least had more original writing, whereas with Breast World, it does the Drag Race thing where it just makes references to past Drag Race seasons instead of actual writing.
Bianca Del Rio, baloney, going down to Ivy Winter.
That was also my biggest problem with All Stars 8. There were just too many references that didn't need to be there. The more I talk about these acting challenges, the more I realize I just dislike them all around, and if I were to pick one that would probably not need to be there anymore, it would honestly be the acting challenge. As for improv challenges, it gives them a little more freedom, and let's talk about them. There again are some pretty obvious choices that I can go with. I like the concept of Bossy Rossi a lot, but I don't think it's ever given us an outstanding performance. Diva Worship from season 11, for half of it, was pretty great, and then the other half was one of the worst train wrecks that I've seen. The World's Worst is one that I've talked about at length before, and it is one that I was about to go with until I remembered a challenge from All Stars, that being She MZ from All Stars 5. To be a drag queen, part of the job in general is to be quick on your feet and do improv. But when you have to translate that to scenarios on TV, sometimes it just doesn't really work out the way you want it, and it's just not as entertaining, and that's what I get with She MZ. I like some of the scenarios here. I thought that Alexis and Shay had the best one by by far, but Miss Cracker's performance was definitely a standout, but even then, it just wasn't anything I'd write home about. And then we have India and Mayhem, and to this day, I can barely sit through this sketch. Tie it all together with the TMZ office style segments where they're trying to act straight, and this portion especially comes off super try hard and it drags on way too long. One of the main reasons why I don't like improv challenges on Drag Race is that for the groups, they aren't able to pick the people they want. Sometimes they do, it's a little inconsistent, and I get why they do it. I mean, it is improv, they have to improvise working with different people. But then you get a season like All Stars 5, one of the most predictable seasons out there, and then Mayhem and India get placed together, two of the queens that have been in the bottom the most, and you really see the writing on the wall from the start. It's a lot easier for production to do the casting so they can kind of predict who is going to do poorly and then put those two together, but I think the performances and the challenges end up a lot better when the queens are able to pick who they want to work with. For the girl group challenges, I don't think there's any that are inherently bad. It's one of my favorite challenges from the show, so I'm gonna enjoy whatever they put out, but season 15's has always left a bad taste in my mouth. It comes back to what I was saying earlier about so many iterations of Drag Race and wanting to stay unique. We saw the start of it on season 14 where they switched it up on how they did the girl groups with a lot more theming to it. And as time passes, I appreciate season 14's more and more. I mean, they had a whole set built, there was a lot of choreography, it was a great tribute. So to spin it into a unique thing again and to just making it into a hee hee haha old people thing, I just wasn't nearly as impressed. All of the comedy comes from the fact that they're supposed to be elderly, the lyrics, the choreography, I mean each of the genres. It's supposed to be entertaining because we normally don't see elderly people do metal or country or hip hop, but like personally, I grew up on the internet. I've seen this concept done a lot of times in different ways. The joke is all in the subversion, and I've been subverted a couple too many times, if that makes sense. There are still some highlights from this challenge. I thought that Aura did good, but Sasha really stole the show. I still say her verse from time to time, and Lux's verse from the country group is so insanely catchy, it gets stuck in my head all day. Just comparing everything that's come before it, I'd honestly rather just have another generic girl group verse from the queens talking about taking the crown. But I am happy that they are trying to stay unique, and I hope they do keep doing themes like this, but if they do something like babies next season, I am going to boycott the show. A challenge that was a lot more popular in the early seasons that's disappeared over time is the singing challenge. You can honestly consider it the only challenge that's really been phased out of the show, but that's because there's a couple other challenges that fit the same role and overall are just better business moves for them to do. If they want them to sing live, they can do it in a Rusical, otherwise they're gonna just have queens record a verse for an original song that people can stream. So there's only a couple challenges that I would consider singing challenges. 2, 3, and 4 were on the main stage with the queens performing for an audience. Season 5 had Can I Get an Amen, which is kind of girl group but kind of singing challenge. I lean more towards singing challenge because I think Ivy won because of that.
I lost all hope today.
And then season 7 there was a John Waters tribute where they were performing live on a set. With all that being said, I don't think that any of these iterations are that bad. Frenemies is definitely cringe, but I really do enjoy it. My least favorite would probably be season 2 just because it gets really repetitive. The next most similar iteration to season 2's would be season 3's, but in season 3 they got to have different genres which kept it interesting. Season 2 it was just the same performance to the Rocker Chicks version of RuPaul's song. There wasn't a lot to go off for judging as a viewer because they cut so quick, and overall it just killed the pacing of the show. It wasn't entertaining in execution, and I think that's why they switched it up for season 3 to give them genres, but as a concept I wish they would do this performance style in front of a live audience. We got it from time to time with the talent show and the roast and stand-up, not so much now because of health regulations, but it would be cool to see them do another singing challenge in this same vein, just not as repetitive, or maybe they get to pick like a lip sync song that they can perform. I just really miss a live audience for some of these challenges. It brings up the energy so much, but I understand why they don't do it anymore. The ball is pretty subjective as for what the worst or even the best could be. I think just structurally though, I don't like season 14's. It's really hard to follow and it's just kind of a mess. Again, for 14 and 15, we're starting to see the producers get in this groove of what challenges are really working, but how can they flip them? And they flip the ball by having every single queen from the season be a part of it and split the cast down the middle and give them each different categories. And I have a good idea of why they wanted to do that. I feel like a lot of the complaints about the modern balls come with the fact that there's just so many queens. So the categories get filled up really fast and all of the outfits are good, but it just gets really repetitive to watch as a viewer. I think the most egregious is the season 13 one where they had like that executive one in the middle, and I do not remember a single look from that. And there were like 13 queens who walked the runway. So instead, I think to keep the categories more fresh, they split the ball, but then that led to a different problem of just being really hard to follow. Half of the queens are in zebra, half of them are in cheetah print, then there's some white, there's some red, white, and blue. There may also be some imbalance in there because the queens are given different categories. And by the time you get to the judging critiques, you just get kind of overwhelmed by the sheer amount of categories. So when they talk about a look that they liked or didn't like from a queen, it's hard to just remember on your own without seeing footage of it. It's just not a clean viewing experience. A while ago, I talked about my opinions on the ball. I feel like it's just a better final challenge, or just a challenge that comes later into the season. I think season 15's was a good placement for it. For stand-up and roasts, I'm gonna combine them because I don't think there's a bad one in the bunch. There's just one that's not as good. And we're going international again because I think the worst one is from Canada season 2, the roast of Brooklyn Heights. There were still some funny jokes in this. I thought that Isis killed it. I think Kendall did good. I understand why Kendall won because she didn't go over the time. And personally, I don't think Kimura deserved the bottom spot. She had some good jokes in there. No performance was super outstanding, and the rest of the queens definitely didn't do a good job.
Make me laugh. I'm still waiting. I know, I'm like...
And this is just for me when it comes to roasts. It's a pet peeve when people use the word fuck way too much, and that was pretty common in this roast. I don't think you need to add the F word in every single time to spice up your joke. If the joke's good, it's good, you know? People sometimes think that there needs to be an intensity within a roast, but I think some of the best sets are the ones that are more cheeky and playful. And overall, I think that was just lacking with this performance. For Rusicals, it's not even close to me. I mean, there are some that are bad, like the social media Rusical or Trump, but the Farmer Rusical is just so offensively bad. The jokes don't land. It's a really unbalanced amount of performance time. One of the teams just has a whole segment where they're holding up a green screen board of Andy Cohen. Season 10 just had some really poor Drag Race writing. I've talked about this one at length in my ranking video already, so I won't waste too much time here. It's barely a Rusical, and it's one of my least favorite challenges ever. We got a couple more to go. The Makeover challenge I'm gonna do next, and I think a lot of people will disagree depending on what they look for. I want to do a video on the makeovers pretty soon because I want to talk about how inconsistent the critiquing is on the challenge. And I think that's what people would talk about with the worst. Like, for example, season 13 had some really terrible judging when it came to placements. And I was going to go with season 13, but season 4's makeover, they just do not look good. I'm so sorry. I always give grace to the earlier seasons because expectations were at a different level at that point. But the concept was pregnant sisters, and you had to make a guy over into your sister, and then you walk the runway with a baby bump. So it already made the outfits pretty ill-fitting, and just it overall didn't look good. I'm not sure if they were prompted on the makeover having this pregnancy concept. I mean, if they were, that's more up to them, but if they weren't, I think it just sets them up for not the best execution. And I don't hate the concept inherently. I mean, pregnancy is beautiful. If they were given the prompt and they were able to execute it in like a beautiful way, that would be one thing, and I think we saw a great interpretation of that when Latrice did her lip sync. But instead, it felt more like they were going for the shock factor and the absurd, and I don't think they would approach it the same way nowadays. If I were to do a full talent show ranking for Drag Race, I think it would be pretty subjective where a lot of the ones land, but I don't think I've ever been more upset over the results of a talent show than I was for Down Under season 1. Scarlett had the best talent of the night. We don't need to talk about it that much. But then we had Kita Mean, who did a magic performance that was really well rehearsed. It was just down to the fact that Rude didn't like magic that much, and apparently the dresses were cheap. Electroshock did an interpretive dance. I've heard from some dancers that her technique wasn't the best, and I think that's totally valid, but when you compare her talent show to the other two, even if her technique wasn't the most perfect, I still think it deserved at least a safe spot. The other two queens did comedic eating. I don't think Arts was bad, it just didn't stack up to the rest. And then Karen made a balloon animal and was safe for it. Like, come on.
Is that it?
Elektra and Kita were put into the bottom because their drag presentation wasn't as good. Like I said, Kita's dresses were apparently cheap looking and Elektra's wig was not good. But their talents, arguably the main thing they should be judged on, were better than the other two, but I think they just wanted to finish off this storyline. Years later, I still get upset talking about this one because of all the production things that happened with Down Under season 1, but it's an entertaining upset. I enjoy talking about it. And finally, I believe this is the last challenge, the finale remix. I split them up from the girl group. There's a couple that I can pick from, but I'm gonna have to go with Clapback. Super Queen is up there with one that I also don't like, but Clapback, I'm just more so disappointed by it. You have Shea Coulee, who has my personal favorite Drag Race verse of all time, Ms. Cracker, who barely missed out on doing a verse in season 10, and Jujubee, a known great singer. On paper, I think they should have knocked it out of the park, and I don't think any of them did bad. They were just given a bad song. The mixing was really bad. You can hear it the most on Shea's, but it's hard to understand all of them. It's just not one of my favorite RuPaul songs in general, and it's so disappointing because we could could have had something so great. But again, I've already ranked this one. I ranked it pretty low, so go check out that video. That's about it for me. If I did miss a challenge, that's totally my bad. There's a lot of challenges that I had to go through. But thank you all so much for watching. I'll give a little update now if you want to stick around. The past month has been a very, very tough month for me for a lot of external factors. There was a ton of construction going on inside my apartment from 8 a.m. to like 4 p.m. every single weekday, and that killed my motivation because like my workspace is in here. My work-life balance has never been something I'm proud of. My motivation and work ethic in general, not something I'm proud of either. I'm trying my best to find that balance, and I just want to thank everyone for sticking around even through me not really posting that much. It's humbling, and it's still weird to me that I have this platform at all because I still view myself as just as much a fan as anyone else. As you can see, I have a lot of thoughts going around in my brain. Maybe I'll do like a full sit down video talking about like just my YouTube career and everything. But for right now, I gotta do a paper. I have to edit this video, so I'm gonna go. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon with another video.